Welcome to Defn, episode number 75. Is it like a what kind of jubilee is that? 75? It's like a okay. I think if you are listening to this, please tweet at us what we should celebrate with. I think it's like a paper anniversary or something like that.
No, paper's one. Yeah, I think maybe it's diamond is 75.
Oh, okay.
Diamond.
So
gold is 50. I think diamond is 75.
So it's diamond then.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think our listeners know what to send us.
I mean, I'm getting close to it.
Please send us diamonds.
So do you actually remember what 50 was? Like who 50 was?
Gold.
No, but who was the guest?
Oh, right. Okay.
Wait, come on. Don't ask us. I mean, we don't remember what happened in the last episode.
but it probably was pure gold though. Yeah.
Probably. I'll look up while we are doing this, so that's okay. Anyway, okay. So episode number 75. Already we have. You have heard our guest putting us into super uncomfortable position that we don't have a shit. We don't know shit about this podcast about ourselves. No worries. So yeah, this is Vijay from Holland and Ray from Belgium.
Yeah. Oh, hello.
Yes. Ray from Belgium. Yes.
Ray from
Belgium. And a special guest today.
From Austria.
Yes. Right from the Austrian
countryside. Please introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry, I didn't. I'm having some audio issues here. Like Vijay, I have like lots of reverb. Not sure what's going on there. But yeah, hi, I'm Philippa. Like I'm a closurist. I'm working mainly on the UI side. I spend most of my time working on Nextjournal, which is a notebook platform for doing sciencey stuff. And not much else to say, I guess. I mean, maybe you have questions.
Oh, we'll stop there. Let's just stop there.
We'll stop there.
I think we're pretty much all done.
My cup is empty anyway. Bye.
So, Philippa. So, I think it's a good idea to start because you say you are closurist. Have you been closurist all along, or how did you become closurist? If you did.
So I guess for most of my ancient or no, let's step back a little. So I guess it all started with JavaScript for me, and it's like JavaScript is kind of like this thing that seems to stick on me that I can never really shake off. But I'm doing this for a long time, probably something like 17 years now or something. So
wow,
been there like with all the really hardcore old browsers, like used to fix bugs in IE 5.5. Those kind of days, they were terrible. Let's not go there. Yes. And so I think it all kind of like started with JavaScript, and at some point I was also kind of like firmly planted in this in the Ruby community, and I think that was mostly about that it was probably the first kind of like community that took JavaScript seriously, in that you can actually animate with these things and so on. So it's kind of like a lot of the stuff revolved around the Ruby community. And I think like from there, JavaScript kind of like had this phase where I tried to always be a little bit better than it was or than it is. So that's kind of like when all these transpilers came up, and then you had like Webpack at some point and whatnot, and all these crazy build tools popping up. And so I think for me, it was just like out of sheer frustration that I looked at all these compiled languages in the hope that I can escape JavaScript somehow. And I think like I found Elm, which is kind of like a typed functional programming language. I really enjoyed Elm, but at that time, we really had to do a lot of like JS interop stuff. So, and the way Elm handled this at this point was really annoying. So you had kind of like these ports, and like let's say you're interacting with a WYSIWYG editor or something, then you had like 200 of these typed port kind of things that lets you interact with the outside unsafe JavaScript world. So that was really annoying. And I mean, at the time, I think I just like played around with a bunch of stuff, and a good friend of mine was using Clojure script and Ohm. So that's kind of like what dragged me into it. It was also my first Lisp ever. So that was good.
So mostly you worked on the front end then, or you said you also did some Ruby stuff as well, or was it Ruby on Rails or some other thing with Ruby?
Yeah, I like Ruby on Rails and a little bit of MERP back then, but I think they merged at some point. But I never really did like the hardcore backend databasey stuff, so it was mostly always revolved around the front end. So
yeah, because you spend a lot of you have a lot of experience from back in the day. I'm assuming like jQuery days or even before that. And
way before that.
Way before that. Yeah.
So it's
like
actually
the
like
HTML thing.
Yeah, right.
You actually
probably like
you actually know. Sorry, go on.
No, it was just like table layouts, the HTML. There were
frames
no
and
frameworks. The good stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say you're probably you remember how to program the DOM.
Oh yeah. No,
because I think
quite
a lot of since after jQuery, I think essentially the DOM kind of started to go away a little bit for a lot of developers.
Yeah, just like that you can actually chain stuff and so on. That was really that was a big step. But yeah, I guess that's why I started this whole thing with the word ancient. Like it feels like lore to me at this point. It's it's not real anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I think nobody even will recognize that days of the web. I think especially the front end is like the rate of change in the front end is so high.
Yes, yeah,
it's crazy. I think back end you can still have like if you're writing CGI script back then, it's still kind of similar kind of shit somewhere. You can still have the same modeling ideas somewhere, but front end seems to be evolved like crazy.
Yeah, and it's really the build tools that's kind of like a really crazy situation, I think.
Like a million.
Yeah.
What about the because it's the other thing that's happened, I think, in the last 5 years, maybe it's post React, is like the way that CSS gets treated in JavaScript as well has changed quite a lot.
Right.
So is that something that you're also? I mean, are you a JavaScripter or a HTML, CSS, JavaScript kind of like all parts, or because those are the things which I think, to me, those are the things which really complicate the front end. That it makes it such a sort of daunting thing to attack.
I think I'm kind of like doing everything, like the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, whatnot. But I mean, the more I'm actually spending time with Clojure and just functional programming in general, I just wish that I could use this for everything, right? So I think at this point in my life now, I just don't wanna use like CSS to place something against another thing. So I mean, at this point, I really wish that I could just program and I could maybe use a constraint solver kind of thing to position stuff and actually have logic in there and not this. I mean, it's not a toy. It would be unfair to say that CSS is a toy language, because it's not. It's like it does a lot of computation and stuff already now. It's quite complex, but I mean, just having to make this jump from, let's say, a language like Clojure into CSS, that's just like I think a cognitive barrier that I just don't want to have anymore. So I really wish it would be like one language to do the full stack.
Because the other thing that I think is like underappreciated is like these animations, because it's quite easy to the CSS animations on the front end in general, It's quite easy to think about like the layout, sort of a bit logical, I think, the layout. And we've got Flexbox now, which looks pretty, looks like it's a keeper,
Yeah,
So,
no, it's a keeper. No, I mean there's a lot of good stuff actually. Like the Flexbox and grid CSS stuff, it's all good. It's like for most for all the basic stuff, it's really well done. But I think like for me, it's like if you're doing like application style layouts and there's still all these strange cases where you open a pop-up or something and it gets weirdly placed out of bounds or out of screen. And I mean all these things that are kind of like to be expected in a proper functioning UI, those are still missing. So
yeah,
I mean just like basic hit detection, like
yeah. Because I was wondering, because initially, I think, as you remember, as you probably have more experience with as well, like the JavaScript was just, you're just sprinkling some things around and then it's just
right.
pages and then that
Yeah.
stuff. And then later we have this frameworks and then this whole SPA thing took over, like the single page stuff as well. So did you use things like, what was it called again? Backbone, yes. I forgot the bone part of it.
Sure. No,
maybe
I
it's
did
a
Backbone.
spine. Yeah.
yeah. And CoffeeScript, and it was like a huge, change in how you build applications. Because I used to do some stuff in YUI EXT.js, and then it became Sencha, and then I also did some Dojo things as well. They were like crazy.
Yeah,
at
I
that
mean,
time.
I did them all. It was terrible, but it was like I had this unreal situation where I ended up in like some dive bar somewhere in I think Budapest or somewhere. I forgot exactly where it was, but it was with David Nolan that I ended like in this dive bar, and both of us were drunk, and we were kind of like had this sobbing moment where we were comparing all those awful libraries that we had to use back in the day, and we tried to came up with like who used the more esoteric stuff. And at some point we both realized that we used a library called Cooks too, and it's kind of like it was this super it's something out of Germany that I think nobody ever used, and it's it was quite esoteric. So yeah, sorry for the long answer. I used Backbone.
So it was no. Okay. So you were just comparing battle scars, like, okay, who has the biggest battle scar?
That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
So I mean, given that it's like a total pain in the ass, why did you do it?
So,
because most of us just think, "Oh, forget it. Leave someone else do it. We're good at the back end.
Exactly.
It's easier."
No, I think like I've always been super interested in UI, like since forever. Like that was always my thing. Like when I started with computers, I like just playing with games, like seeing all this great UI stuff. That's just like that was something that I always wanted to do. And I think back in the days it was like you had to use Flash to do this stuff.
Yeah.
If you wanted to be on the web. And I never really used Flash because I just hated the tooling. Like I think I just found the whole editor awful, and just like being able to use a text editor that is not like this monster felt great. And I think I just got stuck there. It's actually my my first ever gig in this field was actually animating, using JavaScript to animate stuff. So that was like Scriptaculous and Prototype JS. I don't know if that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
It's really,
I did.
Yeah.
So speaking of writing instead of using tooling and then writing stuff in text editor, so Emacs or some other shit, what do you use?
Oh my God.
So at this point I'm using Cursive. So sorry, I'm neither nor, but but I used to use Emacs. Like I used to use Emacs and I used to use VS Code.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
so my big frustration with Emacs was always that it's kind of like this ancient piece of software that never really like the I mean, if you look at the rendering stack of it, like the GUI stack of
Yeah.
Emacs, it's just not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like that I felt like I'm fighting this all the time. Like whenever I had to touch like the Lispy stuff, it was great. Like all this like basically live reloading the entire environment is just fantastic. And Cider
Yeah.
is just fucking fantastic. The GUI stuff is awful.
Yes.
But it isn't Emacs just basically a terminal on a mainframe, you know? So what's the rendering problem? What's going on here? Maybe you know better, VJ. So.
I think it's because they don't have any fancy VS Code things, or I mean, it's not written in JavaScript, so obviously it's better, you know, compared to other stuff.
No, I mean, like it's like just like like the little stuff like pop-ups. You want to autocomplete some stuff, like you want to show stuff in place next to your cursor. It's like
I think that probably the reason is that Emacs has been longer. Emacs has been in existence longer than all the different UI frameworks that we had. So it never picked up one thing. It was never written in Qt. It was never written in any of these stuff. So, it always had its own rendering mechanisms. So it's much more consistent over the, 40 years of its existence.
Is it? Is it?
I love that phrase, yeah.
I mean, whether it is consistently shitty or whether it is consistently awesome, that's in the eye of the beholder. But it is at least consistent.
So, did any of you use Smalltalk?
No, I played with it for some time. Yeah, okay. A little bit. Yeah.
So my first experience doing that, like loading up the environment, loading up the editor, was that it didn't support high res. So I was using this on a HDPI display, and I had like this pixelated mess in front of me. And I think Emacs sometimes has the same flavor. It's kind of like it's just
we call
not
it nostalgic.
I think we can have an extended Emacs section this week. Keep on going.
No, I just don't.
Is it because we're complaining about Emacs?
Not complaining. I think stating facts. I think that's different. VJ, come on.
No, these are alternate facts, man. I mean, these are not real facts. Anyway.
No, but I mean, lots of great stuff in Emacs. Like all this, like I mean, there's just fantastic packages that you can learn so much. Like, I mean, the which key stuff, especially, that's something that we really took a lot of learnings from for the last iteration of Nextjournal.
Yeah.
So,
By the way, I think it's a really, really great talk that you gave at ClojureD, where you were explaining
thanks.
The discoverability and everything.
Yes,
I really loved it. It's a really good talk. So people who are listening to this, you should go out and check out. I think we'll put a link in the description for that one as well. So maybe you can give us.
Maybe stay on the Emacs for a little bit longer. Okay, hold on,
sure.
Hold on.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
It'll pop up again. No worries.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just I mean, saying a few nice things at the end there, which is good. But let's go back to the hate. Okay.
Look, man, I
don't get enough of it.
I heard everything. So bring it on.
No. So what? I mean, apart from like vomiting on the screen with the pixelations and everything, I think that's what you said. That's what I heard anyway. What is it?
Not so saying no.
What? No. So what? Apart from that, what triggered you to? Because you obviously still look at it sometimes for inspiration. What not to do. But what bits? What triggered you to eventually to sort of say, screw it, I'm leaving Emacs behind.
So I always went back and forth between VS Code and Emacs, I guess, because just not because Emacs is so bad or whatever. It's just because the Calva stuff got so much better.
Yeah.
And I really like this notion of having an environment where I can hack the UI. So that always kind of like attracted me to this tools like VS Code or Atom. So it felt like in Emacs that was a much harder. I would have a much harder time doing this because of this kind of like ancient GUI stack. I felt like since like VS Code is just like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, I can just basically do whatever I want. And I kind of like used VS Code to experiment around with a bunch of ideas that I had for getting started with new software projects or kind of like diving into existing software projects that I felt were missing. But then I also kind of like always ran into troubles with like REPL issues that just felt better in Cider. So it was kind of like this back and forth. And it felt like the cursive stuff is already really solid. So and it kind of like it felt like it covers both worlds fairly well. So that's where I ended up.
Well, I think that's an excellent choice. Yeah, you've got to.
Are you using cursive?
I'm using cursive. Yeah, I like to pay the man the money. You know.
Yeah. No, I'm paying. I'm paying the money.
Colin has got fuck off. Colin has got he pays for fonts, but he won't pay for software, you know. He pays for fonts that don't render properly on Emacs, but he won't pay for software.
They render perfectly.
You should see his face, dear listeners, you know.
Just because you can't get Emacs to work, you cannot blame the tool, you know.
No, anyway, what was I going to say? Yeah, just to, if Colin ever listens to this, he's got an open invitation to come back on.
Yes.
But
I'll convince him to switch to Emacs. I think that'll be hilarious. Like, you know, Colin comes on and then says, "Which editor do you use?" I use Emacs to develop cursive stuff. Like, yes.
Yeah. He flips between Emacs and cursive.
So,
just before we go there, what were your experiments, Philippa? What were your experiments around VS Code that you were getting into there?
I mean, I'm just like I'm super interested in alternative visualizations of a software project. So we just used to this way of looking at a tree of files, basically, like a directory structure. It kind of like always looks the same, and to me, it feels like, especially if you're taking over somebody else's project or you just dive into an existing big code base, maybe there's some different visualizations of what's going on is better. Like maybe a network graph that just shows you clusters of stuff, and you kind of like visualize the age of stuff with like by opacity, essentially. So you could end up with like much more useful representations of what's going on. So, or like, let's say, visualize change better, like again, like in a weighted graph, kind of like weighted network graph kind of thing. So those were the things that I was playing around with.
I remember when we've talked about this before. Well, maybe we haven't talked about this before, us three, but I think I mentioned about when we were talking at Clojure D about like the Brett Victor stuff. Because the thing about Brett Victor is, I always found, I mean, I know it's just in some respects, it's a toy, but it's a kind of like path to try and describe or show, okay, because I often think if you look at the system that's running, especially UIs, it would be really nice to be able to see, well, what is affecting, you know, if I move around the cursor or I trigger a particular action, where is that in the code? And that doesn't seem, it doesn't seem too hard to do in many ways. Although I imagine again, it probably. I mean, I imagine it is quite hard, but there must be something around that. It's possible.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of this stuff is about tangibility, right? So you just want to have like an immediate observable effect, and kind of like follow the chain to this effect somehow, ideally. But there's like a lot of like unsolved issues with some of what Brad shows, like just this like sliders kind of thing. I mean, he has like this demos where you're kind of like scrubbing numbers, and it changes like the output of an equation. But then he also shows like that you can scrub the result, and then you see like how stuff in the equation changes. I mean, that's just not not doable. It's like there's a lot of math that's missing to kind of like just do that. So, but yeah, it works great as an inspiration.
I'm curious about your view on because you said how to represent the code, how to represent software in rather than the text format, because it seems like there is always some experiments going on. Because if I say, with my experience looking at different types of editors, different types of visualizations, but something that all these experiments, they never gain the mainstream view, because every new editor comes in and there is a left hand side file browser, right hand side editor, a bit of a map, and rest of the shit is okay, the same thing.
Right.
So what is your view on this? Like, why we are not able to make that quantum leap of switching to a different paradigm?
I think it's just like it's also kind of like practicability, I guess. So I mean, you're used to like this textual representation, and it's easily manipulated. Like in your editor, you're used to your editor. It's just like, I don't know. I haven't found any much better representations up to this point, to be honest. Like, and I'm like at this point, I'm not sure they exist. Like, maybe they do. I mean, I'm totally convinced that a directory tree is not the best representation for the file use case. But for code itself, I'm not sure. Whenever I tried to use like the noodle programming stuff, it was not good. Like, you end up with this tangled mess. And so I would be interested in exploring like a not like this file-based approach, but rather like a snippet-based approach.
I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff people are talking about. I mean, one of the nice things about cursive I don't know about Emacs, whether it can do this, but for instance, if you have a function and you want to just go to its definition, you can just click the when you hover your cursor over it, it will become alive. The link will become visible, and then you can just click, and it goes through to that function definition. I mean, that is so obvious to me. It's such a nice, simple thing that you can just navigate code via. No, hold on, Vijay, calm down.
No, you cannot say.
Your turn.
The thing is, you cannot say, I don't know whether it is possible in Emacs. I mean, there is no that. It doesn't matter what it is. It's always yes. The answer is yes.
Do you have cursors in Emacs?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, this stuff is super useful, but then I'm kind of like I'm still kind of like missing what's going on with this interaction. Like, that's something that frustrates me, for example. Like, I'm using this all the time, but where's the breadcrumb that shows me like the last 5 items that are navigated through?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these are the kind of things.
Like, where's my history?
Yeah, that would be. That doesn't seem beyond the wit of man. These kind of, like you say, affordances.
Right.
On top of these kind of editors,
right.
They're not kind of like, let's say, seismic changes or quantum leaps, but additional affordances that would just improve the experience and make the experience a bit more. Yeah, like you say, improve your memory essentially. The tool trying to remember things that you forget.
And it's just the thing is always like,
that's a really good point, by the way. I've never thought about this.
It's easy to kind of like get lost in this, like, what's a different, better representation for code.
Mm.
But it's actually these tiny things that I think could make a big impact. Like just
Yeah.
It's like coffee cup holders in cars. It's who
Yeah,
knew
no,
that it
it's
was an important thing.
it's pretty much that, right?
Yeah.
No, it's like are you familiar with like Doug Engelbart's work, like
Yeah.
Back in
the
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 day.
the augmented intellect?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I really like to think in that way, like actually what can we do to augment ourselves, like little things that make us better. Like that's also kind
Yeah.
of like the idea about the next journal stuff that I spoke
Mhm.
about with Closure D. It's like just showing little like mnemonics, right? Just like reminding people what they can do, making them learn that stuff.
So maybe as we come on to that a little bit then, because I think one of the things that you were talking about there was this like this discoverability, I would say, is essentially the problem that you were trying to address. Is that fair?
Right. No, that's fair. Yeah, definitely.
So maybe as you could just give us a little. Go on.
Sorry, I should give you a
I
little
was just
what?
going to say maybe as you could give us a little bit of a context as to what you think the problem is and what you were kind of working towards, and just so the lazy people out there can get a quick summary of your talk.
Like
They
a
should watch the
primer.
whole thing, but yeah.
Sure. No, it's like the so next journal is actually what are you doing?
For some reason, VJ is bringing his dog into the podcast. Oops, no, he's back.
He's biting
There's no
my
escape.
feet, and then he needs attention. So
Okay.
I see.
sorry.
No worries.
We discovered our dog. Moving on to the software discoverability. Yeah.
So yeah, like next journal is this 5-6 year old product, and it does a lot of stuff now, and it has tons of features that are basically just applicable to certain contexts, but the old UI favored some contexts over others, and that makes like a subset of features inherently hard to discover. So we tried to emphasize this notion of context. So instead of like providing a default context, it's always about the current context. So you're kind of like have your cursor in rich text, and the system shows you all the actions plus shortcuts that you can do with this rich text. And there's possibly more, but you can click something or press something to show the other stuff. And once like you switch into a code context, the UI kind of adapts. And we took this notion of context not only to like the thing you are working on, like let's say where your cursor is at a certain point, but we also applied this to let's say is there a modal open, or is there like some graphic in the text flow that cannot be hidden, and the UI tries to adapt to that, like hide as little as possible, or in that other context it's fine if we hide stuff. And so we kind of like have this observation of multiple contexts happening at all times, and from that kind of like we infer what the UI should look like. Sorry, it's always kind of like sounds very general. Talk about this.
No, it's okay. But how do you I'm trying to understand
the UI
if there is a
adapts to stuff.
specific
I mean, of
thing in
course
one
it.
context.
Sorry again. I was ranting.
Sorry. Yeah. No. I was thinking, maybe I don't know how to ask the question in a specific way, but I'll just think out loud. Because if you say that there are certain actions possible within, depending on the context, for example, and from the user perspective, isn't it going to be a bit difficult to go to that point? Because I'm going to bring up some shitty UI thing, like Microsoft Ribbon thing, that they hide all the things, and then you select a table, and then they only show the table related stuff. So it's but the thing is that if my context is not there, then suddenly I don't know what is possible with the tables anymore. So how do you see this problem?
I mean, you need some form of default context. I mean, I think there's no way around that.
Mm.
And I mean, I think the
Yeah.
ribbon does this as well, right? So I think if
Mm.
nothing is selected, it still shows a bunch of stuff. So I'm not sure
Yeah.
you really get around that. But ideally, I think I mean, having no specific context is also a context, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
Sounds like super Zen thing.
yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah. So let's loop it back a little to Clojure and your experience from switching from JavaScript to Clojure script. How
Mm.
was the transition has been from writing a lot of JavaScript and kind of chasing the new features in JavaScript, learning which is constantly changing, and then switching to Clojure script. How difficult was it, or
Um,
how easy?
I think in hindsight, it felt fairly easy. So there's a lot of
Mm.
I think at some point I actually gave a talk about this,
Mm.
but I think the biggest hurdle was no, I think there wasn't a real hurdle. It was just like there was some amount of anxiety towards the the parents,
Yeah.
and there was some anxiety about the JVM.
Yeah.
And I think none of that stuff actually was that hard. So it was actually really
Mm.
easy to get into it. And I
Yeah.
think like just like coming from JavaScript, like everything immediately felt way more consistent.
Mm.
I mean, even the JVM, like it felt way more consistent and way better than at the time having to deal with Webpack. I mean, I don't want to be unfair. I have no idea how it is right now. But I
Yeah.
think that was my biggest source of frustration at that time, is having to spend all this time with the tooling.
Mm.
Felt like I was constantly fighting this. It was immediately gone with switching to Clojure.
Yeah.
And just language wise, it felt like I mean, I mentioned I was also using Elm for
Yeah.
a long time.
So you're familiar with functional programming
Right.
and with
At that
yeah.
point, I was
Yeah.
already pretty familiar with functional programming, and I had to switch back to JavaScript script after Elm
Hmm.
because of reasons,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I was missing that part so much, like the immutability and everything. And Clojure gave that back to me, so it was like
Yeah.
it wasn't instant love, but it was like it took me 3 weeks to fall in love.
Well, I mean,
A few
in
days.
JavaScript days, it's like, I don't know, decades. 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's with JavaScript, it's an unhealthy relationship that I have. That still keeps going, but
Yeah. And so because Elm is, as far as I know, or my little knowledge of Elm is that it's a statically typed thing, right? It's almost like Haskell.
right,
So
right.
did you feel like you were missing out any of that stuff when you switched to ClojureScript?
Not really, because at the time where I switched, like all of the cool stuff like Figwheel, dev cards,
Yeah.
that was already in place, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, the really awesome stuff about Elm was always that so you produce an error, right? And the system
Mhm.
kind of like live reloads and shows you the error, and you kind of like
Yeah.
follow it back until you do the fix and then go on. And Figwheel kind of like provided the same experience
Hmm.
for
Yeah.
most errors. So
Okay.
I mean, it's not the same thing, obviously, like, but it had a similar feeling. And the other thing was also I actually liked this notion of everything is happening at runtime way better,
Hmm.
because like in Elm, like just like having to deal with UI, having to give focus to an input field. I was just awful during that time. I mean, I have no idea how it is, but actually doing something, describing something that needs to happen at runtime,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
terrible. And since ClojureScript has this notion, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in ClojureScript world, I'm guessing Usenext has your own homegrown framework, or did you use Reframe or one of these libraries that are available?
No, so Nexternal is heavily
Oh,
using.
sorry, Nextgen. Yeah.
Yeah, Nexternal is heavily using Reframe. But we are using more and more of our own stuff also in between. So I can't give you a proper ratio at this point, but yeah, it's some of the stuff we build ourselves, and there's also Reframe.
So I guess you're also using, like, from a tool set perspective, you're probably using the Shadow stuff.
We're using Shadow, yeah, right.
Yeah.
And that's actually also really, really well done. So I really love that we switched there. And we're also using dev cards, but at this point, probably I think our own implementation of dev cards.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that does a bunch of more specific stuff. And we're actually building something that we don't have a proper name for yet, but it's we call it the Nexternal Toolkit. So that's a bunch of things that we want to open source as we go. So using more and more of the stuff that we use for ourselves and releasing that as open source.
Okay. And so the whole styling part, as well as the logic and DOM control, everything is in ClojureScript in your project.
Right. There's no. I think at this point there's no JavaScript. I mean, there's a bunch of like JavaScript in ClojureScript. Like, we're still calling all these APIs, obviously, but I think there's no real JavaScript code anymore. I think the last bit that we removed was for integration testing, and that's gone now too.
So I'm a bit more. I kind of a philosophical question, you can say. I mean, everything is philosophy if you look at from some lens. Your approach to UI over the years, because you tried Elm, you worked in Elm, you worked in JavaScript a lot, you worked in ClojureScript.
Yeah.
Did the language influence the UI, like your UX ideas anyway? Because I'm curious the developer experience translating into the user experience.
I guess that's hard for me to answer, because I was using React before I was using ClojureScript. I mean, it just feels like React is fitting the functional paradigm like a glove. But and I'm pretty sure there are translations happening where like my dev experience kind of like translates over to the UIs. But I guess now that I think of it, I don't have a good example. I
because
think
I'm wondering because sorry.
I think I mean, I haven't used this extensively yet, but there's a thing called the Glamorous Toolkit. That are you familiar with that?
No.
Which toolkit?
So it's called the Glamorous Toolkit, and it's a thing that's coming from the Smalltalk world, and it's essentially it's a custom UI. I hope I'm not like messing this up now, but because I'm not like from the Smalltalk community at all. But my understanding is that it's kind of like a custom IDE that's made for Smalltalk essentially, and it has all these really great UI ideas. So the author Tudor Girba, like, he is calling this moldable development, and it's kind of like this, like, you are creating this little inspectors for your own code as you go, but at some point they might become the actual product. Or so everything has a single render tree, and you can say like, in my code editor that I'm using, I want to replace like this expression with a graphical visualization, let's say a progress bar instead of something else, or a slider instead of a variable or whatnot. And it has like this single render tree that allows you to do that stuff. And it might be that you just need to create this little, let's say, a visualization or a network graph or a chart, whatever, to find a bug in your code. but then you learn that this might actually be the better result of your work anyway. So you might want to ship the dev tool that you custom made to debug your code.
Oh wow!
And it's really fantastic. Like there's so much to learn from that stuff. That's really where it's happening right now.
Oh, homework, yeah. Okay, we've got to look into this stuff. BJ, get straight onto it.
I'm pretty sure
nights.
there is going to be glamorous.el for Emacs.
Oh my god!
I'm just gonna install and then I'm done.
Yeah, and it's gonna render so well. Yeah.
No, they like fixed all the stuff.
Varnish.
No, but they all of this works really well now. So no rendering issues anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say that some of the things that I watch about, like from the games programming world, like you were talking about earlier on, those people they say, we look at the tools, we look at like the data, we look at like how people play the game, and we find a bug, and then they find all, okay, they track the path through the code, and they make tools to do analysis for that bug, but they end up doing analysis on their code base to find out how often does that bug happen, blah blah blah, and then they say, actually these tools end up, being part of the environment, and hey presto, we've suddenly got a whole new bunch of like very specialist debuggers that just work for that one game. Could be the physics engine on the platform or whatever, but I really like that approach because it's sort of it's very much focused on the problem at hand. But like you say, you might find a general use for it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just love this notion of having a little toolkit available that I can just like use to debug my stuff. So it feels like I mean, I guess it's not much different for backend programming, but in the front end world, it's just so easy to throw in a console.log and just like print something out, right? And it's still like after
I don't
what
know
what feels like 100 years, we're still using this approach, right? So and it's
absolutely.
like every time I use this, I swear, like I'm thinking like I just wish that I had like a little thing, like, because usually I can think of what I need in this situation, but it's just too easy to do this console.log, and I wish I could just throw something in it.
Did you see these other things? These the things like reveal and the other things we've been talking about.
It's really fantastic.
Portal, yeah, because they have these. They use their own thing, but Clojure also has this tap thing now, where you can throw objects at things and do rendering. That seems like good infrastructure,
Yeah, so we did. That's actually something that's probably be part of like this Nexternal toolkit. So like internally, we are having our custom tab, and at any point we can open a little drawer in the app, and it will use our own like viewers API that we use to display like the kinds of results that an external piece of code can produce. So, and at any point in our code base, you can essentially say tap this result to like this drawer, and then you can select a representation for it. That comes in super handy. So that's some form of a better console.log.
By the way, I mean, just a quick small, not completely big digression or digression. I don't know what it is called. It's better to explain what Nextgener is. And I think I'm pretty sure most of the people know in the Clojure community.
Okay.
I hope.
Sure.
Maybe it's a good idea.
But this podcast goes all over the world, doesn't it, Vijay?
That's true. Yeah. I mean, especially for people who are using Emacs, and it's a good idea too, because we're very popular in Emacs podcasting world.
Yeah.
So yeah, sure. Like so Nexternal is a like I assume that people are familiar with what a notebook or a notebook editor is?
Maybe not. Maybe give us like 1 or 2 minutes on that.
Right. Yeah. So you have like so notebooks are these things that are fairly popular in data science, or I guess in science in general. So they're a page essentially that you can fill with some form of like narrative text and pieces of code that can be executable. And from that, you can produce something that looks like a report that is runnable. So, and the most like Mathematica is probably the one thing that popularized this format. But nowadays it's Jupyter that people are probably most familiar with. And Nextjournal is one incarnation of this type of editing. And so it's a product that's essentially focused on data scientists. I mean, you can use it for everything because it's like just code, and it produces some sort of output that can be graphical or whatever. But it's geared toward data scientists, and it should make it very easy to experiment with like machine learning stuff. So it's just very easy to open, like create a new Nextjournal notebook, add a bunch of code cells, like say you want to use like a GPU for that. And it's kind of like it runs in the cloud. It does all the scheduling for you. You don't have to worry about having the correct drivers installed and whatnot. It just like it does the expected stuff. And it's special in that everything that you do in Nextjournal is immutable. And at any point, you can roll back to a certain point in time and restore that. Or you can reference code from another time, stuff like that.
Right.
And so that's also important for reproducibility. That's something that's super important in science, because you have all these issues where code that was written in like 3 years ago cannot be run anymore because you don't have the proper libraries and so on and so forth. And we kind of like solve this because everything is containerized automatically behind the scenes, and you don't have to think about it. So that's kind of like what it is.
Okay. So the whole you talked about front end being completely ClojureScript, and also the back end is also Clojure, right? It's a complete
right.
Clojure
So at
stack,
this point, we have like everything is kind of like Clojure, and we're also like experimenting with Nix and Gix, I think, and maybe that brings in more Lispy stuff. Let's see.
Okay. Yeah, I think we were in a talk in FOSDEM about Gix or Gwix. I don't know, how is it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't give you information on any of this. Like, this is so not my turf. Like, sorry.
But the general idea about Nix and Geeks, I think it's called. I think the general idea is that the operating system, all the packages installed and those kind of things, have reproducible.
Right.
Or let's say they're well sourced, so you know that they're from a particular branch or a particular bit of code or a particular release or a particular tag on the code base or whatever. So I think the code the talk we went to was like how, I think there was it the GCC compiler, VJ, which took something like 4 years to become reproducible.
Yeah,
it was something
so
like
they were
that.
explaining like because you want to have the same exact build or same exact version again and again. I think that they really strive to make everything completely reproducible for every piece of software that you're using, the dependencies and everything, which is super cool. And coming back to the Nextjournal, so obviously it is built in Clojure, but you can just use any kernels or whatever they call it these days, right? You can use Python.
So yeah, it's like that. That's probably the other thing that's special about it. So you can like, special compared to other notebook platforms, it's like you can mix and match languages. So it comes in with a bunch of like default environments. Like we call this like containers that come with a language pre-installed, and essentially like everything that needs to be run, that needs to run that language, we call those environments. And it comes with a bunch of default environments, like you can run Julia, Python, R, Clojure, Bash, a bunch of popular languages, and you can use those together in a notebook. And in a notebook, so you can say like you want to pipe the output of one language into another, and so on. And but you can also bring your own. So you can essentially upload a Docker image that comes installed with a bunch of like or with a language, and you can get that to work as well. And we are also compatible with Jupyter. Sorry, so you can also kind of like go back and forth.
How do you ensure that people aren't uploading bit mining?
Oh yeah, that's like a constant
mining,
source of pain. Like it's just like I mean that's kind of like where I'm really happy that I'm in the front end department and I'm not having to deal with this crap all the time. But this is like an ongoing source of frustration for our DevOps folks. It's really amazing. It's kind of like it's happening all the time, and yeah, it's a cat and mouse game.
Yeah, you've got GPUs that people want
to
mine on.
Yeah, it's not only the GPUs. Like it's, I think at this point we don't even allow GPUs on the free plan anymore. I'm not sure at this point, but still, like people just wanna mine.
Yeah. I think it's also becoming a big problem in free CI/CD tools as well. I think on GitHub and Circle CI, and it's just wherever there is free computing available, people are like jumping onto it and then putting something there hidden in the code base. Anyway,
it's parasites.
Yes, horrible.
So obviously, you talked about a few things, and the things that you like about Clojure script, like immutability, functional programming, and the tooling, good tooling available. Are there any frustrations that you face building such a complex product like external using Clojure and Clojure script?
There are some cases where I really wish we had types, but this is getting better and better with spec.
Mm-hmm.
We're not using spec that extensively yet, so I guess a lot of those issues could be solved with using more specs. I really wish sometimes that it feels like sometimes you run into these errors where you hit the compiler, like the Clojure script compiler, and then it just feeds you garbage. I really wish those could be done better in some way or another, but I was at David Nolan's Clojure script compiler workshop. I think what's possible is done at this point. So I think that'd just be my sense of aesthetics here interfering. But no, I mean, I guess in general, I'm really happy with the language. Like there's no real pain point at this point. No.
Nice. But it is it's like one of those nice examples. It's kind of not like a run of the mill front end, back end sort of application, right? The stuff that you're working on.
No. Lots of stuff is like super custom and
Exactly. Yeah. Like pushing the so-called envelope forward sort of thing. Like the UX is different, the UI is different, the target is different. It's a very exciting project to be part of, and then being in that Clojure.
Definitely, and it has this like research character. So and it's I'm actually really grateful to be in this, and that's actually something I think where Clojure really plays in well, because it feels like being part of the Lisp family and having like Rich is kind of like this inspiring guy that kind of like brings you a tad bit nearer to like the computer science history maybe, and it feels like the community feeds on this computer science history stuff. So it feels like if you're part of this Clojure community, it's easier to get into this old stuff as well. And for that, I'm really grateful, because like you said, when you try to push the envelope a little bit, like going history shopping from time to time can be a really fun and rewarding experience, kind of like stumbling on this old piece of Lisp from the 80s that describes some algorithm. It's like a really fantastic thing.
I think a lot of these things in the 70s and 80s were well described. It's a bit like, I remember we were talking to the people from the Juxt who did the Crux database with this different times, and obviously Datomic as well. has that concept of like, okay, well, we can just store everything. Why? Well, because we've got cheaper CPUs, cheaper storage, cheaper this, cheaper that. All of these ideas were being like conceptualized in the 80s, and they need dusting off now that we've got the compute power.
Yeah. No, it's like and it's also yeah, it's basically just like somebody please just realize what they tried to do back then. That's what it kind of like feels a lot to me. It's like
Yeah.
once you discover this wealth of stuff, like it's just like I wish I had more time.
So I have Martin was on our podcast. I hope Martin is listening to this. Hey Martin, so did you play Scuff Cop that he was talking about, the
Sorry,
online game thing that he was part of?
Oh, I mean, that's kind of
Sharkov.
like Shavkov. Yeah, that's where we know
Yeah.
each other from. Like, it's kind of
Oh,
like
okay.
most of our team has been working together since over 10 years at least. So, and we all kind of like
Okay.
met at the same Ruby conference and started
Right.
working in Rails
Okay.
and did the Shavkov thing, and now everybody learned Clojure.
Okay, so you're also a Scuff Cop. I don't know how to say that. Scuff
Shavkov.
Cop. Okay, that one. So you're also the pro in that one then.
I'm not like, this is one of the most embarrassing things, I guess, most embarrassing facts about me. Like I'm I kind of like I'm doing this thing since forever, but I can't properly play yet. Like they tried to teach me the rules so many times. It's like
but probably half of it you actually developed and then you built the stuff and then
sorry, I did not hear you now. Sorry.
So like the half of the stuff that you actually built and then you never play it. You never got into the game.
Yeah, I mean I played, but it's like they can't let me lose on the actual players. Like it would be so embarrassing. And so I'm just probably the worst player ever.
Okay, cool.
But
by the way, I looked up. Sorry, go ahead.
I've just probably understand it enough to build UIs at this point.
Yeah. By the way, I looked up what is the 50th episode of Defn, or at least the one that we deem to be number 50 is Borkdude's episode. So Michiel Borkent. So we have
sorry, I did not hear you. You're really cut up now.
The 50th episode that we were looking for, like who was on the 50th episode? It's Michiel Borkent. It says Borkdude. So.
Oh, okay.
So it probably was pretty much pure gold. Yeah.
Yes.
Nice.
But this is diamond.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I won.
Anyway. Yes, you did. On that happy note, is there any other topics that you want to mention or anything that we missed poking your brain about?
No, I think I'm actually good. Like I was hoping for being able to mention Jeff Raskin, because that's a book that I'm just reading I find really interesting.
Yeah.
It's called The Humane Interface.
Yes.
For anybody who's interested in building UIs, it's a fantastic book. Like I'm almost done with it now.
Yeah.
Other than that,
his son is also like a really good UX
yeah,
guy,
right? Asa.
Yeah.
Asa, yeah.
Asa.
Like I have no idea what Asa's doing now, but some of his past stuff is really it's great stuff.
Yeah, totally. Because I remember he was talking about this, on Mac there is this Quicksilver thing, like you can just like we have more things now, but as Raskin made something on Windows. Yeah, exactly. On Windows something there. His ideas about his blog was really good. I think I used to follow this stuff some time ago. I think it's like whether you think from noun to verb or verb to noun, that there was really
right.
stuff.
No, but it's also kind of like in this Humane Interface book, like it's really not like, and it's like all this work that Raskin did on the Canon Cat, like it's just really good stuff. Like it's like
seconded. I think totally. I think people should listen to or at least read, and then that's a really awesome book. That's a good point. Yeah. Cool. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. No. Thanks for having me. I mean, I feel honored.
I think it's like one of the best episodes, right? In the 75th one, the Diamond episode. I think we,
Absolutely.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
awesome UX stuff
Cool.
that we usually
Yeah,
don't
and it was like
dig deeper
it's
into.
like an Emacs roasting episode as well. So it's been great for everyone,
Sorry about that,
Look, man.
Vijay. But it's also like it's whenever you invite an Austrian to your table, like the complaining happens quickly. Like remember that. Like we started and lost so many wars at this point. It's deeply ingrained in our nature. Just start hating on something and I'll be your best friend.
No, I think it's there is a lot of fair criticism for every piece of software, and I think Emacs is beyond criticism, so it doesn't bother me.
Wow.
So that's fine.
It's transcended a lot of things.
Yes, exactly. It reached enlightenment, so nothing worldly things bother Emacs anymore.
Right,
it's nirvana.
Yeah. You tell that to yourself.
On that piece of enlightenment.
Okay.
Anyway, thanks a lot, Philippa. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been awesome and yeah.
It's been great.
Cool. Well, have a good time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Defn. And the awesome vegetarian music or the track is Melon Hamburger by Pizzeri. And the show's audio is mixed by Wouter Dullert. I'm pretty sure I butchered his name. Maybe you should insert your own name here, Dullert.
Wouter.
If you'd like to support us, please do check out our Patreon page, and you can show your appreciation to all the hard work or the lack of hard work that we're doing. And you can also catch up with either Ray with me for some unexplainable reason. You want to interact with us, then do check us out on Slack, Clojurian Slack or Clojureverse, or on Zulip, or just at us at Defn Podcast on Twitter. Enjoy your day and see you in the next episode.